Now, I think, of course, if I'm going to be talking about tactics, Joe, man, I got to let you just take the floor and just
Wind
explain
him
to
up.
us.
Team
You
me
know what
up.
I mean? The circle of doom as we saw circulating throughout socials. Is this an issue? Are us not playing through the middle? Is this like a massive concern, or is there some tactics behind it that maybe we're not realizing the importance of?
Oof, this is a big open-ended one. I'll try and keep it to a couple of points. I think that the first thing that I want to talk about is I think this notion that Chelsea are sort of some insane crossing team, and that is literally the only thing that we do, is a little bit peculiar because, I mean, first and foremost, a lot of good teams put crosses into the box. I know this might be a shock to people that assume that it's only Chelsea who actually cross the ball. Liverpool, City, whoever it's going to be, all put crosses into the area. I don't think that this is something that's necessarily done by design. I do think a little bit that part of the kind of the tactical dilemma that we have is a lot of it comes from sort of Lampard's sort of structure and setup of the game, but also the players that he is picking to sort of execute certain roles. And it's not always a problem that you don't sort of play through the middle, but then you have to have the capability in the final third to sort of affect play. And the number one thing that you're looking to do in terms of possession in the final third is you're looking at effectively answering like one or two questions. And the main one for me always, as someone who's sort of coaching and has been coached, is that how do you move centre halves away from the goal? How do you move them away from the penalty area? How do you move defenders basically out of their comfort zone? And when I look at other teams and I'm going to look at how Chelsea build up, I think that for me probably is the biggest concern. It is the lack of, I would say, you could say positional play, you could say patterns of play, whatever sort of terminology that you want to use. When it comes to the final third, you will notice more often than not, we have a very difficult time in moving centre halves off of a point. And when you move centre halves, if you can get to a corner of a penalty box, for example, try and get your number 10, number 8 sort of in those areas, or wide player, asking the centre half to pull questions. That's when you can create some of these spaces in the penalty area or create space for a switch on the other side of the pitch. I think at times, we're looking at sort of the circle of doom, but we have this terrible tendency to play this horseshoe of doom, which is just this left back, left centre mid, DM, right centre mid, right back to the centre mid, back to the DM. It's just
Turismo.
this Turismo U shape of doom.
Yeah.
And we don't play with the intensity. I don't think we play with the passing skill. We don't play with the real kind of pace that you actually, where you're getting the benefit of pulling people out of position.
If I was to ask you now very quickly,
Yeah.
just to be very, very specific, but in terms of the example that you're mentioning now, who are maybe some players that you're seeing that you feel kind of propagate this even further?
I saw a compilation of Mateo Kovacic yesterday, and people were sort of heralding it as some sort of world-class performance. I think the majority of the game, I just saw him passing sideways. I think he is one of the players who frustrates me the most in the squad, because he's so obviously very talented, so obviously a skillful player, great ability to carry the ball, but his willingness to take a risk to play a pass is almost non-existent at times. So I think he is one of the biggest culprits. Jorginho, obviously, for me, in terms of what he offers in the attacking phase of the game, is only going to give you those sort of short, simple passes, and occasionally he'll play his twice a year pass where he hits it around the corner and the centre forward runs onto it.
Something, yeah.
And then I think again you look at the sort of the wide players that we've had. I think Pulisic is at the moment caught between two minds of trying to become Eden Hazard, where he comes deep to affect the game, and then maybe sort of stirring away from his natural game, which for me is playing on the shoulder, getting in behind, being a lot more direct. I think this style of play or change that he's made to his own game, or whether it's instructed as well, has been a huge issue, because you look at the pandemic Pulisic, pandemic P. I'm just going to steal that from the NBA. He was phenomenal, but he was phenomenal because he was super direct. He wanted to get in behind. He wanted to be the focal point. He wanted to be aggressive.
Yeah.
And to be honest, he is not, for me, a wide playmaker. He's a wide forward.
Exactly.
He's not Eden Hazard. He's not going to come receive the ball, beat three people. And I also think the thing as well, he doesn't command the attention that Eden Hazard commanded. Hazard would have affected the game because he's Eden Hazard. Even if he's not really moving, you have to be so conscious of him getting the ball in deeper areas. I don't see the same thing. And I think Pulisic and that combination with Chilwell, yesterday particularly, I think first half, where there was just fruitless crosses going into the box from really weird angles and stuff like that.
Really deep too, yeah.
And then the point being with this U shape and the circle of doom stuff that we're seeing, we're not really seeing players pick up good positions in pockets of space, whether you want to call it a number 10 position, but sort of a danger position, the other side of a holding player, or a position where they can receive the ball, turn, and then look to kind of immediately run at defenders. That clip for me, the clip with the circle, is something that you see quite often. It's not always as exaggerated or as extreme, but we don't really seem to have the midfielders, whether it's by instruction or we don't have wingers who want to drop in, or even sort of with Pep, where you have inverted fullbacks who want to step into midfield and maybe play slightly deeper. We don't have players that seem to want to occupy those areas. And the thing is as well, I mean, as much as I think that some of the instructional stuff from Lampard comes from just the lack of experience that he maybe has in coaching a young side, but for players as well, you have to want to sometimes take the responsibility to be the player that is the catalyst.
Yeah.
And as much as people can point the finger at Lampard, and don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here saying that he is completely blameless in this situation, but sometimes, and I'm looking at Cover particularly yesterday, there are times where he could have clipped a little ball over the top to Callum. Someone could have played a pass, and they don't want to play those passes. They want to play the safe pass out to the fullback.
On that, Joe, you're completely right. But I just Lampard emphasizes he wants people to do that as well. It's not like they're not allowed to do that. He obviously has this tactical idea, but he talks about that bit of magic, that individuality, that risk taking, everything you've just said. I think the gaffer wants that from the players.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you see at times, I think Mason Mount has the capability of kind of really firing in those passes in between the lines into difficult positions. Then you have to have a centre forward who wants to play back to goal and then hold up the ball, bring others into play. You have to have wingers who want to make that sort of diagonal running behind the Pedro run, the classic Pedro run, out to in that saw so many direct goals scored. I mean, the goal against United. There's tons of times that he's got in with that particular run. I think at the moment we've got so many players who want to, particularly in the forward lines, who want to receive the ball to feet all the time. Yeah. And that's not a problem, but it becomes quite predictable. I think teams are quite comfortable in terms of defending against us. So, it's tricky. And the sort of second and probably last point really here is about this whole kind of patterns of play and build-up play and all this sort of stuff here. I think when you have absolutely elite players, this is sometimes why I think that really top clubs are better when they just have a guy who's fantastic at managing players. Someone like Zidane at Real Madrid when he had all that success.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone...
Ancelotti as well.
Even Mourinho too, you can say as well. Yeah.
Guys who are just fantastic with players. Like Ancelotti, that Chelsea team that won the league on Ancelotti did not need to be told where to stand on a football pitch. They didn't know, you stand here and then you pass it to him, and they literally, didn't come into the equation. I think this group of players that Chelsea have, their age, their profile, their lack of experience, the lack of maturity that they have, particularly in Premier League football, that I think potentially they've needed someone like that to be more instructional, to be more of a tutor, be more of a teacher in terms of build-up play. And I think having someone potentially on Lampard's staff or maybe Lampard himself who is a little bit more in tune with doing this sort of positional play, it doesn't have to be the most prescriptive football in the world, but at least giving guys ideas on where to stand, where to receive the ball, where to potentially play passes. When Mount receives the ball in the inside forward channel on the left, where should I be running, where should I be looking to move to? And I think some of that stuff for a young team, having that kind of lack of structure does hinder them, because now that they're tired, and now that they're natural talent, I mean, we've all been there, when you're tired, if you guys making YouTube videos, if you're knackered, sometimes the quality is dreadful because you're just like, okay, half-arse it. Same with any profession, that your brain's you're not thinking as quickly, you're not reacting as quickly, you're not sharp. Sometimes you need that muscle memory of that structure, of all of those sort of training practices back on and say, okay, I'm knackered, I'm 50% capacity here, but I know we've done this 1,000 times in training. If I receive the ball with my back to goal here, if I pass it behind me to the right, I know Reece James is going to be there.
Yeah, Conte, and that's Conte's
fully agree.
And it's Conte, it's Sarri,
it's Sir Alex Ferguson back in the day. I remember, like, Paul, even adding to that point, Paul Scholes was saying, a lot of times he doesn't even have to look to see who he's passing to because they have that tactical framework. So I get what you're saying.
Big issue. It's the big issue. It's that these young players, for me, have needed more of an instructor, more of a tutor, more of a coach's coach to kind of get them through these difficult periods. Because I think last season, I love some of the stuff Lampard did in games, some of the tactical tweaks, but he had a lot of individual ability that I think won games. I think this season, now that we're seeing players kind of dipping in form, players tired, players maybe not living up to the potential when we bought them, the lack of structure, the lack of some of this sort of tactical play, how to sort of build the play out from the back, is not, we're not really seeing it. And then the last point really is that sometimes we don't really have the profile of player to do that. I don't think really beyond Thiago Silva, we have a centre half who is excellent at bringing the ball out in terms of bringing it into midfield. I don't think we have the midfielders who really want to play those aggressive, punchy passes. The little no-look Thiago Alcantara passes he's playing at Liverpool. Your De Bruyne's, your Silvas, not necessarily those profile of players, but they will take risks when they play the ball. So I mean, it's for me, I think there's a lot of combination of stuff, but it's a lack of structure. I think sometimes the players that we have are not taking enough ownership of the situation. Sometimes you have to be the guy that wants to get things going. It doesn't matter what sport you play in. Sometimes you have to sort of put your foot in the ground and say, okay, I'm going to be the catalyst here. We don't really have that, I think, as much as we potentially could do. And it's a little bit to do with the balance of the squad. As I say, you want to play a 4-3-3, particularly in this day and age in the Premier League. You need an athlete who can pass. You need someone who can do the work and then still be good enough on the ball. Whether we have the right blend of players, as I say, the kind of the change of Pulisic from being a guy who likes to get in behind to be direct to being more of a kind of Eden Hazard sort of Diet Coke version. He wants to come deep and sort of receive the ball. Same with the right hand side. Ziyech is a deeper playmaker. He wants to come in wide. He's not going to stay wide. He's not going to get in behind. So it's a little bit of profiles, a little bit of coaching, or I think a lot of coaching or lack of coaching and structure. But it's something that I think potentially, again, if we're looking at potential new coaches, I know we're not getting into that, but I would imagine that the person that they're looking for is someone who has more of that kind of profile in terms of being able to organise, instruct, and sort of get a really, really overly tactical view of the game. Because I think as the profile of the squad is so young, it's something that we sort of need to look at.
Yeah, and I think that plays its part as well, and I think that kind of falls in line with some of the comments Lampard's been making about, we're not that team just yet, which, in hindsight now, it does make a ton of sense. I mean, we're looking at certain guys like Mason. Mason's now just starting to show that type of potential that he can take control in a game in midfield and, make something happen, kickstart the play, kickstart that resurgence, as we've seen in the past few games, and that is something he's just starting to show now. So he'll need even more years of development of playing to, reach new heights and add new things to his game. Similar to, the development structure for, I think, just every football player. When you're young, a lot of these guys start off playing really different compared to what they eventually, how they eventually become in the end. And, touching on what Lampard was saying too about when he had guys like Drogba and Lampard, that makes sense. I think that Everton game, 3-2, 2 wonder goals in the final 5 minutes. I think we don't have any players in the team that can produce a moment like that. And really, what defines a big top 4 team is that mixture of players taking responsibility in moments like that, because they're great players, as well as that framework which they can rely upon when the individualism isn't there. So I think this even brings up even more questions, which maybe we'll have to address in future streams. But to just continue this on for a little bit more, Jan, I know I've been watching you just, thinking and formulating pondering. Yeah,
very interesting, man. I am. I regarding to the tactics, a lot of good stuff said there. One thing that, if the benchmark at the moment is, say, a Manchester City who have developed and evolved and they sort of changed, they've been more resolute this season, one thing they've always maintained is if they're going to be the dominant side with possession, and often they are, and I use that as an example because that's what Chelsea, self-proclaimed are. Frank Lampard's like, we're a possession side. We have more possession than City lose to them. We have more, I think we beat them as well with more possession. But that just demonstrates how much we want to keep the ball against, regardless of the opposition, which could be a problem sometimes in terms of tactical approach. But if you are going to go with that. I was thinking about this when Joe was talking about moving the centre-backs out of position, drawing them away, which is great, and that's important as well. Yeah. I feel like it needs to start deeper as well, because City cast their rod a lot shallower as well, not necessarily in the final third. They really try and do vertical passing and really try and coax the two strikers out to the point where, look, we want you to think you got a sniff, and we want to give you pressing triggers. So you think not only do, say, if it's a 4-4-2, the two strikers, maybe one of the midfielders gets a little bit excited as well, and then we've got such immaculate ability of playing out of the tight spaces in our own defensive third and we've got the players to do that. Now we've bought ourselves a little bit of space to play, and not even in like fast transition, just building up an attack. But they're in a position to do it better without everyone facing the ball behind the ball. So it's very good to pull the centre halves out of position with tricky wingers, ball carriers. Someone like Kovacic is good at that, whether he doesn't make these certain passes. I think against Bayern Munich when he was moving the ball around a little bit, it's causing some trouble. It doesn't do it enough for me, but just casting the rod a little bit more shadow, giving them a little bit more hope, but than snapping like, nope, we've got the absolute ability and we back ourselves to play out of this. Obviously, playing like that demands a great deal of confidence, which Chelsea's not packing right now.
100%. Yeah,
but that's how you got to do it if you're going to play like that,
Yeah, I think that's even like touching on that even more. Lampard is trying to bring like a high level style of football to the club, where it's about influencing your game on your opponents and playing like a big team. That it's not a reactive team like we've normally seen over these past few years, and even this season. I've seen potential. I've seen glimpses of moments where, like for example, there was that one passage versus Leicester City when Pulisic, we thought, won the penalty. That was executed perfectly and beautifully. And I think with more time, especially next season, where to play this type of way, it touches upon even previous points we've made, because you need real strong time on the training ground to really bring this football home. But all these guys are really working together in the sense where even if there are injuries happening, at least the guys behind them will be able to add something to the team as well to maintain that momentum. So, it is pretty crazy. I'm wondering what's going to happen, but I think for us to even hope of anything positive, just fully fit players first at least, and maybe just simplifying things a bit like last season, because I think one thing with Lampard, which he has to get credit for, he's not this useless tactician that doesn't know what he's doing. I think we've seen so many examples of times where he's done the right things. He doesn't tend to make the same mistakes twice, which is a bit surprising and disappointing this season, that we have seen him making the same mistake twice, which hasn't really typified his young career so far. Like first season at Derby, games against Leeds, they were they beat them, but in that decisive game in the playoff, out-tactics Bielsa, got the win and went through to the next round. And even last season against teams like Liverpool, teams like United, in the end we beat them in the FA Cup to go through, etc., etc.
Tottenham double
massive as well. We've seen that he is a very good tactician. He knows how to adapt. I think how he used Jorginho and Kovacic last season was really instrumental to get the best out of these guys to help the team. And I think if Lampard wants to turn things around, as you were touching upon before, Tian, he needs to kind of harness that energy from last season. Try to go back to the basics in that sense, and maybe accept that this type of football, he can work upon it, but it's not going to happen overnight like that. It's not going to come in the next week or the next two. Maybe against teams like the FA Cup game we have coming up next. That's when you can test it out. But I think right now we've seen the potential. Games like Sevilla, which I thought was really excellent. Games like Burnley. I thought Krasnodar, that second half, that was when the 4-3-3 really became a thing. It was a 17-game unbeaten run, but it didn't really start for me until maybe like 4 or 5 games into that run against Krasnodar, second half, where we saw the first time we saw that midfield of Mount, Kante and Havertz, and we got 3 goals in quick succession, which we didn't demonstrate at all during that entire 60 minutes of the game. And for me, I do feel like potential-wise in the long term, there is something here that can work. And you guys, this has been a really, really just good discussion where we can, talk, feed off ideas and try and come to understandings together about, what is happening behind our season. Why have things turned sour? What does the future hold? And I think by, breaking down all these elements behind the season so far, it does paint that picture altogether about, what's happening with our season. So, you guys, I do want to say on that note, obviously, thank you, Football Therapy. Thank you, Joe Tweedie, as well, for coming on. You guys, always great talking football with you. I hope we do a lot more of them as well. And thank you guys for watching as well. Of course, this is part 3. There's part 1, part 2 as well. So make sure you guys stay tuned. It will be in the card above. I'm in the FC. This is I'm Nini FC. This is Blue Lions TV. I'll catch you guys later with some more videos.